At MedStory, we take privacy seriously and follow all healthcare privacy laws. Some details may have changed to protect confidentiality. The views expressed are solely of the individual speaking and do not represent the views of their employer. I was doing some research about you before this interview, and I asked ChatGPT, how many lives do you think Dr. Gibson has saved in his work? And here's what it told me. It says, it's obviously hard to say, but probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives globally have been saved based on his contributions to cardiovascular care. When you hear that, what do you feel?
Yeah. Wow, you're causing me to think about a lot of things that I kind of think about obliquely, but haven't really owned.
Welcome to the MedStory Podcast, a show where we share the stories of the greatest minds in science and medicine. I'm Spencer Locke, and on the show today, how Dr. Michael Gibson went from a small-town kid dreaming of stock car racing to becoming a pioneer in cardiology, an advocate for open access medicine, and the founder of WikiDoc, a platform changing how the world learns about health. You've heard me say this before. The hardest part isn't the science, it's the access. And that's where the story begins. Because for Dr. Michael Gibson, who's one of the world's leading interventional cardiologists, the road to saving millions of lives started in a place where access was almost non-existent, and it's called Stillwell, Oklahoma. A small town with a staggering statistic. Life expectancy is just 56 years old. It's a place full of disease, but short on information. From those tiny towns, Dr. Gibson would eventually find himself walking through the halls of Chicago's elite universities. The culture shock was real, but it shaped him. But back then, the path forward wasn't so clear. Because before he was a physician, before he was a researcher, before he was the founder of WikiDocs, Dr. Gibson dreamed of something else entirely. He was the son of an artist mother and an attorney father, with no one in medicine to guide the way. And yet today, his work has transformed how we treat heart attacks, and his open source medical platform has helped save millions of lives around the world. So how does a kid from Stillwell, Oklahoma, with no doctors in the family, end up pioneering the way the world understands cardiology? Well, to answer that, we have to go back to his childhood.
Well, I don't know really when I decided I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a stock car driver, if that helps. I was born in Oklahoma, spent a lot of time in a place called Stillwell, Oklahoma, population about 800, gravel road with one stoplight. Grandparents who I spent a lot of time with were on the auto repair store. And the biggest night of the week was Friday nights, going to the stock car races. And these were all my heroes. And of course, they came in and did their auto parts. And so that's all I wanted to be. I just wanted to be a stock car driver. Now, my grandmother gave me a nickel one day, and she said, now go down the block and get yourself a book at the book fair. So I got the letter C of the encyclopedia from 1927. And I was a voracious reader, so I was completely caught up with everything that began with the letter C back in the year of 1927. That was my internet back in the 60s. So right now, Stillwell has a life expectancy of 56 years, the worst in the United States. A lot of big Indian population, Native Americans there, a lot of diseases of desperation, a lot of diabetes, a lot of alcohol. So I came from a place with sadly, a lot of disease, and I came from a place that really didn't have a lot of information, a lot of access to information. So more than wanting to be a doctor, I was obsessed with when you have nothing, when you don't have books or anything, when they had that Scholastic book club thing, I was like obsessed with getting books because I hadn't had access. Well, that really followed me through the rest of my life, really wanting to do all that I could to really ensure that people had access. I would say that was almost more important to me than going into medicine. My mother was an artist, painter. My father was an attorney that did business type stuff, was also an entrepreneur. So neither of them really saw a future for me in medicine. They thought I would go to University of Tulsa. That would be my big aspiration. Now, we did have books in the house called the Great Book Series. They were these leather-bound books that got really dusty on the shelf. Some Britannica salesman came by and convinced my parents to buy these. And they had this beautiful gold, I thought it was an eagle on them. Later came to realize it was a phoenix, and it was in the crest of the University of Chicago. And later came to realize these were the, quote, great books. Now, we moved from Oklahoma to Kankakee, Illinois, just south of Chicago, and Kankakee was not a big step up from Oklahoma. It had some of the highest unemployment. A survey last week showed that it had the highest kind of murder rate in Illinois, I think it was, the most dangerous city in Illinois. That's saying a lot for Illinois. And I wouldn't say I had a great education there in public schools. But there were always these books on the shelf called the great books. I had no idea what they were. But one night we walked into high school, which was the college night, and there was a guy sitting in a room all by himself reading a book. His name was Les Walker, and he was from the University of Chicago. And I got to say, I got to be honest, I really didn't know what the University of Chicago really was, even though I was from Illinois at that point as a high school kid. And we began to realize those books on the bookshelf, they were all from the University of Chicago, these great books. Well, through what was probably some kind of clerical error, I assume, I got into the University of Chicago, began to read those great books. And it was a cultural shock to me, complete shock. I can't even tell you what a cultural difference it was going from Oklahoma and Kankakee to the refined kind of liberal arts education of the University of Chicago. So it was really eye-opening. And I did enter at that point a program called the Arts and Sciences, basic to human biology. And it was a pre-medical program. So my decision to go into medicine was via a very liberal artsy kind of, and that's where I began. So I'm a painter, I'm an artist, but also a doctor. So I try and make sure both sides of my brain are stimulated and used. But let me just say my journey continued, though, in wanting to get the word out and provide access in the following way. Back in the 90s, we would, you may be too young to know this, but when we would give a talk, we would use a Kodak projector with a carousel of these glassine slides. There was some guy in the basement of the hospital. You'd bring down a pretty good drawing and he would make it look really good, drafting it up, and then he would take a picture of it and turn it into a slide. So the person who gave the talk owned the slides. They really were truly yours. And the biggest fear was that the slides were all going to fall out of the carousel and then you'd have to reorder them, or the bulb would burn out on the projector. You had to carry an extra bulb around. That was pre-PowerPoint. But once PowerPoint came, it was a revolution, because then you could share your slides. You can make them yourself and you could share them. So I was in the internet boom of the 90s. I was in San Francisco. And if you didn't have your own internet startup company in San Francisco, you probably weren't living in San Francisco. So I sat in my daughter's room and I just said, let me learn how to do this website thing. And I made a website where you could put up your PowerPoint slides and share them with everybody. And one of the trials wrapped up and I put it up on this website and began to tell everyone about it. Next thing, 10,000 downloads of those slides by people around the world. And it became obvious to me that this internet thing was going to be a very powerful way of sharing information and distributing access equally to everybody. As long as there wasn't a digital divide and they had access. And that was going great. In fact, it was going so well. And by the way, you didn't need a retinal scan or Visa card. You just got onto the site and downloaded the slides. And it continues that way to this day. But people didn't like that. They got really angry. namely professional societies that held these meetings. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to sell people slides. So at the meetings, people would give me their slides, I put them up, but then the society sued me for copyright violation. They said, well, we own those slides. And me and my friends said, no, you don't. You do not own those slides. So I actually embedded a little clear animated GIF that you couldn't see for the first 10 seconds. And then it would display downloaded from clinicaltrialresults.org. So I told this professional society, okay, open up that slide. And then I said, wait 10 seconds. And I said, see, you downloaded the slides from my site. So they backed off, apologized. But it got me thinking a lot about copyright. And it was also at the beginning of the copyleft movement. And I did a big deep dive into copyright, and copyright began the printing press. Imagine if you were the king, someone now had a printing press, and within a day or two, they could print thousands of pieces of seditious material. That had never happened before. Mass production, mass printing. So you had to have the right to copy. That's where the word copyright comes from. It was really initially a law intended to diminish the distribution of content. Now, at a certain point, the king said, so I can't read everything, but I'm going to have to appoint people to watch over this. So if you're the owner of the printing press, I'm going to give you permission to print. You're going to have copyright. You're going to have the right to copy. So the owner of the means of production, the owner of the printing press, was in control. The creator had no ownership of their content. Only the person who owned the printing press. We still live in that world. Isn't it crazy? The means of production are next to nothing. The cost of storage is next to nothing. The cost of distribution is nothing with the internet. But yet we still have copyright. And we still have journals that are making billions of dollars a year distributing content that they didn't create, that they didn't pay to conduct the experiments. They didn't put in the effort to conduct the experiments. They get people to volunteer to review those articles, and yet they're making billions of dollars. So I do think if there is information that could potentially improve lives, in fact, even save lives, I don't think it's right to put it behind paywalls. And that was what really propelled me to create a copyleft medical encyclopedia. It's like Wikipedia, but it's called WikiDoc. Wikipedia is a little too complicated for patients, maybe not sophisticated enough for docs. So WikiDoc is targeted to healthcare professionals at that kind of level. We also have WikiPatient, which is for patients, about 1,200 diseases there. We have 106,000 chapters of content on WikiDoc so that you can go right to the subheading of what you're interested in. If it's the epidemiology of a headache, or if it's the differential diagnosis, all the different things it could be, you can zoom right into that micro chapter. And now it's free, it's up to date. You got to realize there is a textbook called Up to Date. It is up to date, but it is out of reach. It costs $4 a year, I think, for a subscription. I could be wrong on that number now. Maybe it's changed. But I think people would be dumbfounded if they knew what doctors make in other countries. We're talking about monthly salaries of $50 or something. They're driving a cab to make ends meet. They're never going to be able to afford a subscription. What they do have, what everyone has, is this. Everyone has a cell phone. And we sought to make it accessible, free to everybody, cell phone. And it's been very successful. We have 1.7 to 5 million views a day. We've had to expand our servers at this point to accommodate that kind of bandwidth. And that gets us close to 1 billion views a year. So when you asked what prompted me, I always wanted to serve in a certain way, but I think there are bigger ways you can serve than just taking care of one patient. I think you can serve in ways that takes care of the whole community. And as you get older, you want to do things at scale that really impact the lives, not hundreds, but millions of people. And so I think that's been probably one of the more rewarding parts of my medical journey.
Wow. That's a really powerful story. With that, I have so many questions from the great books to you being an artist to you growing this platform. First, let's start with the current where you just ended with WikiDocs. You were already ahead of your time being like, we need to get the information out to people till everyone has access, right? Now we are in a day and age where people have unlimited access through AI. So how does that change now that we have almost an information overload? Application becomes the key. And so what role can this play?
Yeah, just amazing. I think ChatGPT and other platforms are amazing. That being said, where are they getting their knowledge from? And that's where I have a concern. We had a Google grant for a few years, and I would argue with Google a lot about this. It sounds like such a stupid question, but what is truth? Now, Google would say ground truth is whatever people are accessing the most. I disagreed. I said, if that was true, we'd all think the world is flat. It takes content experts to really figure out what is truth. So we have had a couple of thousand doctors edit the content millions of times over the past 17 years. It's not an echo chamber. I specifically tell our doctors, you can look on the internet to gather information, but it can't be an echo chamber. We don't just want to repeat what other sites are saying. We want to make sure it's valid and curated. So I have big concerns sometimes about the accuracy of what's happening. Now, I did an experiment for some of these board exams. You can now sit at home and take the board exam and use anything you want. So I used ChatGPT. ChatGPT got it right about 80 to 85% of the time. And that's pretty good, right? Well, why are we testing ChatGPT to see if someone's competent in medicine? First of all, that seems ridiculous. Number two, when it comes to patients' lives and health, do we want to be right 80% of the time? Or do we want to be right 100% of the time? So some of that may come down to, and it is access. How do we keep up to date? What we do is I have the team go through the major medical journals, whether it's New England Journal, JAMA, Lancet, and whatever kind of articles are in those current journals. We go through and make sure the content is updated. It's a little bit like we built the Eiffel Tower, but we're continuously repainting it. It's a continuous process at this point. All of our drug content comes from the FDA website, and so it is highly curated. So I think accuracy is very important. If someone finds something inaccurate, we change it. That's part of the copyleft open source process, is getting comments in. So what am I doing now? We're creating a website where I will be the AI avatar. You know, you do a few minutes of me talking and staring into the camera, nodding and all that, and uses my voice. And so now I will answer questions, but the source of the answers will come from highly curated content on that site. So you're right. The problem isn't access to information now. The problem is the fire hose of information. And now people are looking for a DJ or someone to help them synthesize all this and crystallize it and make it digestible. So we pivoted. I do think all the kind of AI tools will supplant many textbooks, but I think highly accurate, curated content, we got to make sure that's the source of what's being put out on AI.
I agree 100%. That's one of the biggest challenges, is that it can be right majority of the time, but that's really dangerous if it's giving you that, if there's that 10% error and is not being reviewed by a professional, like that's where it can be really scary. And so training the models based on maybe WikiDocs seems like a really good idea, and taking it to the next level to where your video is actually going to be on there and it's going to be the AI avatar doing it. How do you do that? How do you think that's going to handle, or how a patient's going to feel about that as far as trust goes?
All trust is local. In my vision of the world, what we will be doing someday is we are going to work with many doctors around the world. If you want us to create an AI avatar of you, we'll do it. Then their own doctor. See, this is what people want. They want to hear from their own doctor. They may not trust all of medicine, but they trust their own doctor. So ultimately, you've got to get communication from their own doctor. Now, their own doctor won't know everything. I don't know everything. I don't even pretend to know everything anymore. But I think with these tools, we can do a much better job. I have to admit, I think we can do a better job than we're doing right now, particularly for those fields that we don't know anything about. Now, you might say, well, okay, so if you don't know anything about rheumatology, send your patient to a rheumatologist. Okay, we'll do that. But the problem with medicine these days is it's so disjointed. People end up with so many different specialists. There's no quarterback. You got to have a quarterback on the team. So I think where AI will help will be in helping all of us be better quarterbacks for the entire team and for our patients.
I love that. So I want to go back to, you said you're an artist and your mom was an artist, right? Is that where your inspiration for you to become one came from?
Yeah, I was a horrible artist. My mom would have me paint clouds. She was good, but I was a kid. I was like 5 or 6. She'd give me a board and say, here, honey, paint some clouds, because you can't really screw a cloud up. So I would paint those clouds, but it did, very importantly, being a good visual athlete, being a good observer, did inform my scientific and medical career. So I'm an interventional cardiologist. We look at images of the heart. As you can imagine, interventional cardiologists are like artery blocked. I will open artery. I will put stent in. And so they stare exclusive. And I can say this kind of stuff because I'm one of them. Stare exclusively at the big pipe in the heart that they're trying to fix. But they completely ignored the septic system downstream. Didn't even look at it. So I began to think, I was painting angiograms. That sounds crazy. As an artist. And I noticed, yeah, there's the arteries, but then there's this cloud, going back to the cloud, there's this cloud of dye. It's got to be there, right? The dye has to go somewhere. So it went into the heart muscle. And I said, we should start looking at this cloud of dye in the heart muscle. And we did it for a couple of years, looking at heart attack patients. And one day, all the data was sitting in file cabinet, had been entered into a computer, but we hadn't analyzed it. And it was time to submit those abstracts to one of these meetings. I said to my statistician, I said, what do we ever do with that cloud of dye in the heart muscle? I said, let's start looking at that. And so she brought me back this figure or table that showed you had normal flow into the heart muscle. If the dye was getting out of the heart muscle, fine, you were great. But if the dye wasn't getting in and out of the heart muscle, you had a much higher mortality. And I said, well, okay, that's revolutionary. But I said, here's the real question. If there's normal blood flow down the artery, down the main pipes, but if the problem is downstream in the septic system and you're not getting any blood into the heart muscle, how do you do? Well, it turns out all these years, the goal had been to get normal flow down the artery. And I worked with a group called the TIMI study group that stood for thrombolysis blockbusters in myocardial infarction. The goal was to get normal flow in the artery. Well, if you had normal flow in the artery, but you hit a brick wall downstream and the heart muscle was closed, your mortality was as bad as if you never got the artery open. It was as bad as having a closed artery. About 5 or 6% of the time you died. But if you had a normal flow down the artery and normal flow into the muscle, the mortality was only 0.7%. It was about 8-fold lower. This changed our entire thinking. The goal changed from just getting the artery open, say in a heart attack, to getting both the artery and the heart muscle open in a heart attack. Now, what we know is like only half the time or maybe 60% of the time where we're getting the heart muscle open. So we had a lot of work to open up the downstream capillaries, the little blood vessels. Why are they closed? They're closed because when you have a heart attack, your heart gets swollen. And when it swells from the injury, it swells shut, those little vessels. Or there's little teeny tiny blood clots going down there. There's all types of reasons these little vessels are closed. So now we've done a lot of work to target those little vessels to try and improve outcomes. Back in the 90s and 2000s, I led an effort in 1.2 million people to get people to the hospital quicker and get their arteries open quicker. And we did get the time from when you hit the hospital door to getting your artery open down by about 30 minutes, resulted in a 5% improvement in mortality. But we still have a hard time getting people to the hospitals quickly enough. So that's where a lot of our effort lies now. What I do these days is work on a few drugs where we actually, when someone's having a heart attack, we give the drug in the home because we want to get the drug going as soon as possible. We give an injection under the skin. Don't need an IV or anything. That way we can get the ball rolling. That way we can get the artery open before someone shows up. And that way for every hour after we do that, we cut off about 1% mortality. So the point of the story is by being a good visual athlete, it caused me to look at an angiogram in a way no one had looked at it before. So as researchers, it's important to not just analyze data. All these kids these days, they just want data. Give me the data. I think it's very important to start as a data collector, because when you collect the data, as you're sitting there looking at something, you begin to say, I notice when this happens, this happens. That's how you form hypotheses that you want to test. You also realize when the data is junk that a statistician gives you. So be a data collector, be a visual athlete, be a data collector.
Do you think that there is a use case to incorporate some sort of art class into medical school to allow them to maybe change the way that they think from strictly analytical to maybe a little bit bigger picture?
Well, look, I'm not an unbiased observer here. I would like to think so. There are some forward-looking things to have people go to museums and stuff like that. I think, and I just published an article on the intersection of kind of art and cardiology. If I was redesigning the medical schools of the future, and I do work with people who are designing the medical schools of the future, I think we need to de-emphasize the ectopic brain thing. You don't need to memorize all the stuff that you memorize in medical school. You need to have much better analytic skills. You need to know how to digest all that fire hose of information. You need to figure out what's good, what's bad. But you also need to learn how to be a better observer. And in my dream world, you would sit there and you would learn paint a patient's neck. So where's the neck vein at? Where are those veins? Where are those arteries? Do things like that would really help you be a better observer of what you're looking at. So, you can't make someone feel something, but you can actually make them be a better observer, I think.
Why do you think that makes them a better observer?
I think it's a lot like when you say, you know what, when I write it down, I remember it best. It's also like, I never really stared at someone's neck before. If you really want to learn to see something, you need to learn to stare and be comfortable with staring. Looking at something a long time, you begin to see things you didn't notice before. When someone points out something to you, you're like, I never saw that before. I never looked at it that way. I think having to study different parts of the body would be very important. Like when I give my TED Talk on this, I usually show the deck of cards that I worked my way through the anatomy book over the summer before medical school, drawing everything. So I was like a monk recreating Gray's Anatomy on my own single copy on index cards. But I think it hints that in your mind when you actually stare closely at something for prolonged periods of time.
Yeah, and I imagine that kinesthetic feedback loop is really powerful, right? Just continuing to drive those neural connections.
That muscle memory thing. Yeah, I think you're right.
Absolutely. So I was doing some research about you before this interview, and I did ask, after learning about all of the research that you've done, I asked ChatGPT, how many lives do you think Dr. Gibson have saved in his work? And here's what it told me. It says, it's obviously hard to say, but probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives globally have been saved based on his contributions to cardiovascular care. When you hear that, what do you feel?
Well, I had a lot of mixtures of feelings there. You feel tremendously humbled. That's a lot. I think I feel fortunate. Every day I wake up and feel healthy and look out around what I'm surrounded by here and feel grateful. Look, you don't value your health till you lose it. And I am so lucky I have good health. I do have some abnormal lab values these days. And I have an abnormal, what's called Lp(a). A kind of 20% of people have an elevated Lp(a). I had a high calcium score. So rather than just being a doctor, I think the next part of my story is being a patient and being a patient advocate to educate other people about knowing their number to get help. I guess I also feel sad for the millions of people I didn't get to help because of the issues we have with respect to access to medical care. Through a series of unfortunate events, I did make my own luck. I'll give you that, but I got lucky. I was lucky to work with the people I worked with and to have the opportunity to get in the door, to be at the table, to be able to participate in a way that I got to participate in making all those advances. And I feel very so proud and honored to give one of the first doses of one of those clot busting medicines to a patient. It's really mind blowing to give the first medicine of some type to someone. It's very mind blowing to have worked with my mentor in the cath lab to put in some of the first stents ever put in. And believe it or not, we would put the stent in, the metal tube in, open it up and see if the artery stayed open. Then we would pull it back out of the body. So I feel so lucky to have been a doctor at the golden era of cardiology, the 90s. It was breathtaking. We were making such amazing advances in both drugs and devices all at the same time. It was such an amazing time to be in medicine. I feel humbled and honored and proud, and particularly coming from where I came from, coming from Oklahoma, where the life expectancy in my town was 56, to Kankakee, Illinois, which was no great place, to now being able to help people. I think if there's any lesson for people to take away from this, it doesn't matter where you come from, it's where you're going.
Absolutely. I guess when I meet people like you, I'm inspired, but I also worry because I see how busy you are. You're the CEO, you practice, I'm not sure if you're still practicing actively, but you're doing all of these things that consume up so much of your time. And I find that having talked now with hundreds of doctors is that oftentimes they don't have the space to fully absorb the impact that they've done for the people around them. And have you found ways to do that? Or do you still struggle with that, to find ways to be like, wow, I've potentially saved millions of lives and I need to take a moment to just sit in that and be present?
Yeah. Wow. You're causing me to think about a lot of things that I think about obliquely, but haven't really owned. I have made very conscious decisions to back off, do less in the cath lab. In fact, these days, rather than dedicated time here in Boston, I go to other countries to do cases and work with my friends around the world and still keep my hands in it without having to be on call at night, which is nice. I've been honest about this. I have said in the past on interviews that I do view medicine the health hazard, both physically and emotionally. I think the health of doctors has been improved from when I started. I'm talking about on call every other night. You get up at 5 in the morning, start at 6. You don't get done at 6 in the evening. You get done at 6 in the evening the next night, working 36 hours straight. Do that for a while, do that every third night, do that for 8 years. It can't be good for your health. It can't be good for your health. It's not good for your mental health. It's not good for your mental health. So I think current doctors have a much more balanced view of this. So you can take care of yourself. You can't take care of anybody else. So I also try and tell people, look up the word, when people are thinking about a job change, I said, open up Wikipedia. They're like, what are you talking about? I said, open up Wikipedia, search for the word cult. And then I search for the word cult. and say, yeah, read to me the characteristics of a cult. The cult characteristics are you can't leave the cult. Cult defines your value. No value outside the cult. You will not survive outside the cult. I say, does any of this kind of ring any bells for you as to what you've been participating in terms of your work life? And doctors, sadly, doctors are good people. Not all of them. But in general, most doctors are pretty good people. Most of them, to be honest, they went into this to help people. But sadly, their altruism has sadly become other people's business model. And they don't take good enough care of themselves. So, these days, people are dumbfounded. I'll tell them, nope, I'm only going one day to that meeting. They're like, but you used to go for all 5 days. And I'm like, nope, I'm going to be there 2 days. So I find now when they hear that, societies will say to me, no, you've got to come. You've got to chair a late-breaking trial on this or that. Or my favorite was an invitation today to be on a cooking show on TV at the meeting. And I said that was the greatest invitation I've ever gotten, but I'm going to respectfully decline. I'm leaving. And my friends know this. All the people close to me know that I'm putting more boundaries on my time and living my life with a way that I want to live it. There's 2 articles I saw today on Twitter. One said that having a dog increases your brain volume. Another said napping increases your brain volume. So I'm napping and hit dogs. I think those are the 2 ways I'm trying to improve my health. But I do try and emphasize to younger people, they say, just like you've accomplished so much. And they ask me, would I do it again? And I have to tell them, I may not have. If I know what I know now, that I really just want to watch shows about consciousness on YouTube and spirituality and art shows and paint and watch some trashy TV on I'm not sure I would have done all that if that's the end game. I also have grandkids now. So I think that changes your perspective too. It's too bad you can't live life backwards. It's just too bad that you don't know where you're going to end up and what you really needed to do where you would want to end up. I just want a simple place. All I really want is like a loft or a barn to paint in. Some pretty simple stuff. So I think when you get older, life gets simpler and you don't need all this stuff and you don't need to done all this stuff to get where you're at. So I try and coach people on that. I think there's a lot in medicine where people are they're striving for purpose. And until you achieve those, you feel like you have your purpose and you've achieved that purpose, I think you're going to be striving. So maybe you need to fulfill that purpose and then you can take a step back. But humans are complex. Like I always say to my sons, they get really angry when I say this. Science is easy. People are hard. The older I get, the more people things I do. Science is easy to say, this drug lowers the level of this. This level is associated with bad outcomes. Let's see if this drug improves outcomes. Okay, that's easy. Try getting 20,000 people in 1,200 centers to do that. That's the hard part. So I've become much more interested in I've always been interested, but at the end of the day, I think my life, my fulfillment, my purpose now is leadership and helping lead things and making sure we're staying on course. I worry very much about medicine and the undue influence that corporatized medicine plays, that industry plays. I feel like I spend a lot of my time defending all of our independent efforts from undue influence by others. And I may lose that battle after I'm gone, but while I'm here, I still want to continue to fight for our intellectual and academic independence.
What is one of the things that excites you most about it, knowing that we have these challenges? Is there any hope that you're looking forward to, or you're saying, wow, there's actually some really cool things coming in the pipeline?
Oh, yeah. Look, think about it. I grew up working for Eugene Braunwald, who's the editor-in-chief of Braunwald's textbook of cardiology, the most foremost textbook, and seeing print stuff like that kind of being replaced. And then even what I did with open source internet stuff being replaced by AI. The world is changing so much. So how do you ride the wave into the future rather than mourning for a past that's not coming back. And I see unbelievable potential. Here's what I work on a lot these days. The old model was there was this paternalistic doctor that you went to, and he gave you prescriptive advice about what to do. That's broken. That's gone. Those days are gone. I think now that you're empowering patients with all these tools, they show up to the doctor and say, look, this and that's going on. I think this may be the problem. And the doctor is almost there for a second opinion. That's okay. That's okay. Empowered patients are good patients. Now, in the past, we had CME, continuing medical education for doctors. I really want to work on PME, patient medical education, making patients more empowered and knowing what the hell's going on and taking control of their own healthcare. I think the other problem was for trials, you had to live by the big city hospital to get enrolled in one of these trials. And one of the things I'm most excited about is a trial that I did where we enrolled, get this number, 34,000 people over the internet with no bricks and mortar, all over the internet, consented over the internet, followed up over the internet to see, did you get hospitalized? We look at the insurance claims to see if they got hospitalized. We had amazing engagement by these people. And by the way, these were people over 65 years of age. I thought, these people are never going to do this. We had 90% plus compliance with them filling out endless questionnaires online about how's your sleep? How's your anxiety? How's your depression? How's your exercise? How's your diet? I mean, we have so much data. Before I even did the study on the main goal, we were writing papers about COVID and anxiety and depression during COVID. It had no relationship to the trial we were doing. But it got me thinking that the road ahead is going to be much more of a bring the trial to the patient. Don't expect the patient to come to the trial. How are we going to do that? Well, I work with a lot of companies now. We work with a company that has 50 million people on apps in gyms. You go into the gym because your BMI is a little high. You want to lose some weight. You get them on the app and you say gym. And you know that thing that looks at visceral fat versus fat underneath your skin? If you're someone, and this is a new way to think about obesity, if you're someone whose obesity is due to visceral or the body fat inside your body, that's where we're going to get our biggest bang for a buck. You could be a great participant in one of these upcoming trials. If you're interested, here's the QR code. You get signed up, drug gets shipped to your home. You don't know, maybe you got placebo, maybe you got the active drug. Oh, you go and someone comes and draws your blood if we need to. Oh, someone comes and gets your EKG at your home. Someone comes and gets an echo in your home. Or better yet, you're going to the gym. Let's turn the gym into the new clinic. Go into the gym and some nurse will be there 2 days a week and draw your blood or do your EKG. So I think and by the way, we're going to know what happened to you through the electronic medical records. You're not going to have to come see a doctor or a nurse. So we did this trial at 2% of the usual cost of a trial. Now, right now I'm running another series of trials. We're $0.4 billion in development cost. We can't afford to spend billions of dollars every time we have a new drug. So I think we'd have many more shots on goal. We'd have much more access by people everywhere to get involved. We have real-time reporting of data, going time. We know exactly from that electronic medical record who's alive and dead and having events so we can monitor the safety better. So I just think that's going to be the future. Now, to add to that, here's my vision. I don't know if I'm going to get there. I'm trying. I think I may get there. For this trial I'm leading of the 34,000 patients, I want to have a meeting. I don't want to present the results at a cardiology meeting. I want to create a new meeting. And the name of the new meeting is Patients First. Patients stands for Patients, Accessing, and Innovation to empower trials and studies of the future. We need to put patients back at the center of everything. Again, I may not get there. I'm in discussions with all these major journals to pull all this off, but I want to create a meeting around the patient where the patient presents the results of a 34,000 patient trial, where we have a couple of days of meetings with patients say, how did you like this? How can we make it better? Rather than having a doctor lead the trial, we need a separate parallel arm of patients really leading these trials. So I want to put patients first. That's the name of this kind of meeting. I want to get it off the ground. I want to have an annual meeting, really, rather than professional societies. Let's get patients back at the center.
I love that so much. First off, I'm totally down to support you in that because I am totally on board for that. And I think the biggest theme that I'm seeing here is that accessibility drives innovation, right? From WikiDocs, it's making medical information accessible, to Amazon, a one-click checkout, making things accessible, to now AI making information accessible.
Apple Pay, I don't have to all that stuff out. Click on a button and I get my product, right?
Right. And now into research, improving the accessibility, decreasing all those barriers that it takes to even participate in it, speed up that feedback loop, and that's where innovation happens.
The FDA has set a precedent where they have said, if you're hospitalized and the hospitalization code says you had this diagnosis, we're willing to accept that as a regulatory endpoint. Very critical. So we can harness the insurance claims databases to drive this. I will say we've published a few papers that show the results of the trial are the same. If you use the claims database or use all the fancy trial mechanism of collecting all the documents and doctors and everybody reviewing it, and you get the same answer.
Oh, interesting. I know we're coming up on our time. Can I ask you one more question?
Mm-hmm.
Are you, yeah?
Yes.
So there are going to be many doctors and healthcare providers that are going to listen to this and understanding where you've done and what you've done from the field. If you were to look back at yourself 10 to 20 years ago, what would you tell yourself, or maybe what would you tell them?
I would tell them, I would remind them again that you can't take care of anybody else if you can't take care of yourself. I would remind them that 400 doctors a year commit suicide. We lose an entire medical school class each year to suicide. I would remind them, don't just take care of your body. You need to take care of your emotional health. I tell them, think about what you're doing. If you're coming home at 5 o'clock at night and you're lying in bed working on your medical records till 10 at night, someone is paying you to not follow your dreams. Is it worth it? Is it really worth it? Look in your heart. Look at what you're doing. Think about what you really want to do in this life. Advocate for yourself. Join the movement to go back into private practice. A lot of physicians are saying no to corporatized medicine. Reclaim your autonomy. I think doctors are so unhappy because they have no autonomy. I think sometimes, and I've been good about, this is one thing I'm good about. Sometimes if you think you're in a prison cell looking out the window at the sky, turn around. The door may be unlocked. You can walk out. I've walked out of a lot of jobs. I think it takes courage, but you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. You get to be my age and you look back and a lot of that stuff just wasn't that important. Your family's what's important. Your personal relationships are what are important. It's a trite thing. All the people always say, I never would have wanted to work another day. That's true. Take care of yourself. Take care of your family. That's what it's all about.
That's amazing. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate you to take the time to sit down and share this story, because I know that people need to hear this. And I can only encourage you, after seeing the tremendous impact that you've had on the field, I hope that you can create as many opportunities for yourself to sit and appreciate all of the amazing work that you've done and the millions of lives that you impact. So thank you so much.
Well, this is my last thing today, so I'm going to go paint now.
Thanks for listening to the MedStory Podcast, where we share the stories of the greatest minds in science and medicine. I'm your host, Spencer Locke, with a special thanks to our executive producer, Shaina May. Our music comes from Blue Dot Sessions and the Descript Audio Library. The MedStory Podcast is made possible by MedStory Studios and listeners like you. So if you'd like to support us, please leave a review. it means more than you know. And if you have a story to share or want to produce a podcast of your own, reach out to us at info@medstorymedia.com. We'll see you in the next episode.